You look exactly the same, Marcus. Still wearing that sad little off-brand jacket, I see.
The words cut through the ambient chatter of the Hilton ballroom like a blade wrapped in silk. Marcus Aldrich had just stepped through the gilded double doors of his 20-year high school reunion, a glass of sparkling water in his hand, searching for a familiar face that didn't belong to her. But fate, as it always had with Vanessa, had other plans. What Marcus saw when he turned was not the girl he'd once loved. It was a 43-year-old woman draped in designer labels, her smile sharp as cut glass, flanked by two other women from their graduating class who were already smirking in anticipation. The diamond on her left hand was ostentatious, new, and clearly meant to be noticed. She was performing, and Marcus was her audience. Vanessa tilted her head, addressing the growing semicircle of curious classmates with theatrical pity. 8 years since the divorce, and honestly, I thought you'd have upgraded by now. What happened to all that potential everyone kept talking about? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt the familiar heat rising to his collar. His hand tightened imperceptibly around his glass. But Marcus Aldrich did not defend himself. He did not mention his house in the hills, his private jet, or the ink still drying on the largest clean energy acquisition deal in North American history. Instead, he simply lowered his glass to a passing server's tray, offered a ghost of a smile, and said, "It's good to see you too, Vanessa." No one in that room knew that the quiet man in the second-hand blazer had, exactly 4 hours earlier, signed a contract worth $380 million. No one knew he owned the very hotel they were standing in. So who was Marcus Aldrich really? And what happened when the woman who destroyed him discovered exactly who she had just humiliated?
The name Marcus Aldrich meant nothing to the people in that ballroom. To them, he was the quiet kid who'd married the prettiest girl in school, lost her to a wealthier man, and then simply faded. A cautionary tale whispered over wine, a ghost who had the audacity to show up at reunions in shoes that saw better days. They remembered him as the dreamer who never quite made it, the small business owner whose modest logistics company had, according to Vanessa's gossip, limped along for a few years before dying quietly. But the truth was something they couldn't have imagined. In a world of billion-dollar energy conglomerates, Marcus Aldrich was the invisible hand that moved markets. He had spent the decade after his divorce not licking his wounds, but building an empire so quietly, so deliberately, that even business journalists struggled to connect the dots. His company, Aegis Renewable Solutions, had started as a 12-person operation in a rented warehouse in Cleveland. Now it held patents for 17 breakthrough technologies in solar storage, controlled strategic partnerships across 3 continents, and employed over 4,000 people. The $380 million contract he'd signed that morning was for the complete electrification of the Midwest's largest shipping fleet, a deal that would eliminate millions of tons of carbon emissions annually and reshape the logistics industry for a generation. The ink was dry. The announcement was scheduled for Monday. By Tuesday, Marcus Aldrich's face would be on the cover of Forbes. But tonight, he was just a man at his high school reunion, wearing a blazer he'd bought at a thrift store in 2019. He preferred it that way. The blazer was comfortable. It had good memories attached to it. A road trip with his son, a small vintage shop in Asheville, laughter over bad coffee. Marcus had learned in the crucible of his divorce that the things people flaunted most desperately were the things that mattered least. Cars rusted, designer labels frayed. The only thing that endured was the quiet knowledge of who you truly were. He drove himself everywhere, despite owning a fleet of vehicles. He still used the same battered leather wallet his father had given him at 18.
His one indulgence, a private office overlooking Lake Erie, was known only to his inner circle, and he visited it so rarely that most of his executives assumed it was a storage room. And then there was the folder. Tucked into the inner pocket of that second-hand blazer was a slim manila envelope containing a single document. It was a certified copy of the deed to the Hilton Grand Lakeside, the very hotel where the reunion was being held. Marcus had acquired the property 18 months earlier as part of a broader real estate repositioning strategy, absorbing it into Aegis's hospitality subsidiary with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. The general manager knew his name. The regional director had his private number. The corporate owners had learned 3 fiscal quarters ago that Marcus Aldrich was not a man you wanted to disappoint. The folder was not for show. Marcus hadn't even planned to bring it. But his assistant, a fiercely competent woman named Patricia, who had been with him since the warehouse days, had slipped it into his bag that morning with a cryptic sticky note. Just in case, you never know who you'll run into. P. Patricia knew about Vanessa. She knew what the divorce had cost him, not financially, but in the deeper currency of trust and self-worth. She had watched him rebuild himself brick by brick, and she had always suspected that someday, somewhere, the past would come knocking. What Patricia didn't know, what no one knew except Marcus and the 17-year-old boy currently attending a robotics competition in Chicago, was why Marcus had truly come to the reunion. His son, Elias. Elias Aldrich was the quietest, most determined person Marcus had ever known, and Marcus saw himself in the boy with an ache that never quite dulled. After the divorce, when Vanessa had walked away with half of everything and custody of their infant son, Marcus had made a promise to himself. He would never use his wealth to buy Elias's love. He would never be the absent father who sent checks instead of showing up. He would earn his son's respect the hard way, through presence and patience and the slow, unglamorous work of being there. And Elias, in turn, had made a quiet choice of his own. He had asked his father 3 years ago when he started high school to not tell anyone about the money. He wanted to earn his place on merit. He wanted his achievements to belong to him, not to the shadow of his father's empire. So Marcus had kept the secret. He kept it when Elias won the regional science fair and the local paper spelled their last name wrong. He kept it when Elias's friends joked about their modest apartment, the one Marcus had carefully chosen to match the cover story. He kept it because his son had asked him to, and Marcus Aldrich would walk through fire before he broke a promise to his child. That was why he had come to the reunion, not for nostalgia, not for vindication, but because Elias had called him the night before, his voice tight with something that sounded like hope, and said, "Dad, there's a girl. She's in my robotics club. Her mom went to your school, and she'll be at the reunion. Could you maybe meet her? Just say hi? I know it's weird, but—" Marcus had said yes before Elias finished the sentence. He had come to the reunion to shake a woman's hand and smile and be the kind of father his son could be proud of. He had not come for confrontation, but confrontation, it seemed, had come for him.
The ballroom was a cathedral of polished surfaces. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables draped in ivory linen. At the center, a dance floor gleamed like a mirror, reflecting the silhouettes of couples swaying to a jazz standard filtering through hidden speakers. To the east, a long bar served champagne and cocktails. To the west, a raised stage held a projector screen cycling through photographs of the graduating class, 20 years compressed into a slideshow of fading memories. And at the heart of it all, Vanessa was holding court. She had positioned herself at the most visible table in the room, flanked by her entourage of carefully curated friends. Her second husband, a corporate attorney named Gregory, whom Marcus recognized from a magazine profile, stood nearby, schmoozing with the former quarterback and the woman who'd been voted most likely to succeed. Vanessa had orchestrated the evening like a theatrical production, and she was unmistakably the star. Marcus had retreated to a quiet corner near the windows, a glass of water in hand, waiting. He was scanning the crowd for the face Elias had described, a woman named Diane, mid-40s, red hair, kind eyes, when the microphone crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The reunion organizer, a man named Todd, who had been class president 20 years ago and apparently never stopped campaigning, stood on the stage with a wireless mic and a grin too wide for his face. "We've got a special treat tonight. Some of our classmates have volunteered to share a few words about where life has taken them. And first up, Vanessa Devereaux." Applause erupted. Vanessa rose from her seat with the practiced grace of someone who had been waiting for this moment all evening. She took the microphone from Todd, kissed him on both cheeks, and turned to face the crowd. 20 years, she said, her voice honeyed with false nostalgia. Can you believe it? 20 years since we walked across that stage, clutching our diplomas, convinced we were going to change the world. She paused for effect. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Some of us did change the world. Some of us built careers, started families, made something of ourselves. Her eyes swept the room, and for a moment they landed on Marcus's corner. Her smile sharpened. And some of us, well, some of us peaked in high school and never quite figured out what came next. Laughter. Scattered, uncertain, but audible. Marcus felt the weight of glances turning toward him.
But that's the beautiful thing about reunions, isn't it? Vanessa continued. They remind us how far we've come. They show us the choices that mattered and the choices that didn't. She lifted her champagne glass. So here's to moving forward. Here's to leaving the past where it belongs. The toast was raised. The applause swelled. And then Todd, sensing the awkward undercurrent, made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. "Speaking of the past," he said, his voice booming through the speakers, "I see someone in the corner who's been pretty quiet tonight. Marcus Aldrich. Marcus, come on up here, buddy. Say a few words." The room turned. Every pair of eyes found Marcus. He stood frozen at his table, water glass half lifted, caught in the sudden spotlight of unwanted attention. The projector screen, still cycling through images, landed on a photograph of the senior prom. Marcus in a rented tux, Vanessa in a blue dress, both of them impossibly young and radiant with hope. The timing was cruel. No thank you," Marcus said, his voice even. "I'm fine right here." "Oh, don't be shy," Vanessa called out, her voice dripping with saccharine encouragement. "We'd all love to hear what you've been up to. The last I heard, you were running some little shipping company. How's that going?" The crowd tittered. Marcus saw Gregory, Vanessa's husband, smirking into his whiskey. "It's going well," Marcus said quietly. "Just well?" Vanessa pressed, stepping down from the stage and weaving through the tables toward him. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. "Come on, Marcus, don't be modest. Tell us about your big success story. Tell us how the man who was voted most likely to change the world actually did it." She was close now, close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume, the same scent she'd worn on their wedding day, sharp and floral and weaponized. Her eyes glittered with the particular cruelty of someone who had already decided she was the victor in a long-ended war. "I remember when we were married, you used to talk about building something that mattered, a legacy, you called it, and look at you now." She gestured at his blazer, his quiet corner, his lack of entourage. "I guess some dreams just don't work out."
The silence that followed was heavy as wet wool. Marcus looked at her. He looked at the crowd, at the curious faces, the pitying glances, the phones subtly angled to capture the moment. He looked at Todd, who had the decency to look mortified.
He looked at the prom photograph still frozen on the screen, and inside him something ancient and patient stirred. He could end this, right now. He could reach into his blazer, pull out his phone, and make a single call that would bring the hotel's general manager sprinting to this ballroom. He could tell them his name, his real name, the one on the deed, the one that would appear in Monday's headlines, and watch the blood drain from Vanessa's face. But then Elias's voice echoed in his mind. "I want to earn it, Dad. I want to be my own person." If Marcus revealed himself now in front of all these people, the story would spread. It would reach Elias's school, Elias's friends, Elias's robotics club, the girl with the red-haired mother who might be watching from somewhere in this very room. Elias's carefully constructed world, built on the fragile premise of normalcy, would collapse overnight. Marcus made his choice. "That's fair," he said calmly. "Some dreams don't work out the way we expect. It was good to see you, Vanessa. Congratulations on everything." And then Marcus Aldrich, owner of a $380 million contract and a hotel and an empire that stretched across continents, turned and walked toward the exit. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "Leaving already?" she called after him. "The bar's still open, or is the tab a little too steep for your budget?" Laughter burst from the crowd, not cruel exactly, but relieved. The tension broke. The entertainment was over. Marcus Aldrich, the night's designated punching bag, was retreating to whatever modest life awaited him outside these gilded doors. He reached the exit. His hand touched the brass handle, and that was when the doors burst inward, and a woman in a crisp navy suit strode through, her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale with urgency. It was Patricia, and the entire ballroom heard her say, "Mr. Aldrich, the board just called an emergency vote. The acquisition is public. Reuters is running the story in 15 minutes. You need to get to the command center now." The room went very, very quiet. Marcus stood in the doorway, one hand still resting on the brass handle, as Patricia's words hung in the air like the final note of a struck bell. "Mr. Aldrich." Not Marcus, not Buddy, Mr. Aldrich. The title had landed in the center of the ballroom and detonated, and now the shockwave was spreading outward in concentric rings of confusion. Patricia, realizing too late what she'd walked into, lowered her phone. Her eyes swept the room, the frozen crowd, Vanessa's rigid posture, the projector screen still showing prom night, and her professional composure cracked just enough to reveal a flash of protective anger. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, more quietly now. "I didn't realize you were—" "It's fine, Patricia." Marcus's voice was calm, unhurried. "Give me the summary." "Henry from legal called. The commission's accelerated their review of the Orion deal. They're pushing for the announcement tonight instead of Monday. The board's already in the war room, and they need your signature on the final disclosure before Reuters breaks the story." The Orion deal. $380 million. The acquisition that would transform the clean energy logistics sector. The deal that Forbes had been chasing for 6 months. Marcus nodded once. He reached into his blazer and withdrew his phone, not the modest device he'd been using all evening, but a second phone, sleek and black, its screen already lit with a cascade of encrypted notifications. He unlocked it with a retinal scan, scrolled through the alerts, and began typing a response with the unhurried precision of a man who had long ago stopped being impressed by urgency. "I need 3 minutes," he said. "Have the car brought around to the south entrance." "Already done, sir." "And Patricia." Marcus looked up, meeting her eyes. "Thank you for coming yourself. You could have called." Patricia's gaze flicked to Vanessa, then back to Marcus. "I know," she said. "That's why I didn't." The unspoken meaning was clear to everyone. Patricia knew exactly where Marcus was tonight. She knew who might be there. and she had made a choice, a deliberate, protective choice, to deliver the news in person, to be a witness to whatever might happen, to stand beside the man who had rebuilt himself from ashes and deserved, at the very least, to have someone in his corner when the past came calling. Marcus's expression softened. It was the first genuine emotion he'd shown all evening. "You're the best decision I ever made as a CEO," he said, quietly. "Let's go." He turned toward the door. "Wait!" The voice was Vanessa's. It was smaller now, stripped of its performative honey, laced with something that might have been confusion or might have been the first cold tendril of dread. "Wait," she said again. "What acquisition? What are they talking about?" Marcus paused. He didn't turn around. "It's not important," he said.
"Like hell it's not important." Vanessa's voice rose, cracking at the edges. "You walk in here looking like that, and suddenly your assistant bursts in talking about millions of dollars and Reuters and command centers. What is this? What are you playing at?" The room held its breath. Marcus turned, slowly, deliberately, and when he spoke, his voice was still calm, still quiet, but it carried to every corner of the ballroom with the weight of absolute certainty. "I'm not playing at anything, Vanessa. I came here tonight to meet the mother of a girl my son cares about. That's all. I didn't come for this." He gestured vaguely at the room, at her, at the prom photograph still frozen on the screen. "I didn't come to prove anything. I didn't come to settle scores. I just wanted to shake a woman's hand and smile and go home." He took a step forward. "But since you asked, the acquisition is Orion Fleet Services. It's the largest clean energy logistics deal in North American history. My company, Aegis Renewable Solutions, has been negotiating it for 14 months. The contract I signed this morning is worth $380 million. And in approximately 12 minutes, every major news outlet in the country is going to publish a story about it, and my face is going to be on a lot of screens, and for a few days, my life is going to be very, very public." He paused, let the silence stretch. "But tonight, I'm just a father trying to do something kind for his son, and I'd like to finish doing that before the world finds out my name, so if you'll excuse me." He turned again. "That's not possible." It was Gregory this time. Vanessa's husband had set down his whiskey and was studying Marcus with the cold, calculating gaze of a corporate attorney who had just realized he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. "Aegis has been a ghost for a decade. We've been trying to get their principal on record for 3 years. No one knows who runs it. It's the most anonymous major corporation in the energy sector." Gregory took a step forward, his jaw tight. "If you're really the CEO of Aegis, prove it." The challenge hung in the air. Marcus looked at Gregory. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at the crowd of former classmates, their faces a mosaic of disbelief and confusion and dawning awe. He looked at Todd, who had set down his microphone and was gripping the edge of the stage as if it might keep him from floating away. And then Marcus Aldrich did something that no one in the room expected. He reached into his blazer, withdrew the slim manila envelope, and handed it to Patricia. "The deed. To this hotel. Corporate records are filed under the Aegis Hospitality subsidiary. The general manager's name is Robert Chen, and his direct line is programmed into my phone." Patricia opened the envelope, glanced at the document, and nodded. "Confirmed." The word hit the room like a thunderclap. Vanessa's face went white. Gregory's expression curdled from skepticism to horror. The murmuring crowd fell silent, then exploded into a frenzy of whispers and gasps, and phones being lifted and fingers flying across screens. "He owns the hotel? That's not possible. He's wearing a thrift store blazer. Aegis Renewable Solutions, isn't that the company that just... $380 million, did he say? I thought he was broke. Vanessa said he was broke." The noise swelled, crested, and then broke against the sound of the ballroom door swinging open once again. A man in a dark suit strode through. His name tag read Robert Chen, General Manager. His face was ashen. "Mr. Aldrich, I just received word from corporate. I had no idea you were attending an event here tonight. If I'd known, I would have. Personally, it's all right, Robert. He raised a hand. I didn't announce myself. That was intentional. Sir, is everything satisfactory? The ballroom, the catering, Everything is fine. Marcus's voice was gentle now, almost kind. You run an excellent hotel. The staff has been professional. The facilities are immaculate. You have nothing to worry about. Robert Chen exhaled. The relief on his face was visible, palpable, almost comical. And then Todd, still standing on the stage, finally found his voice. "Holy shit," he whispered. The microphone was still on. The words echoed through the ballroom. And for the first time all evening, Marcus Aldrich smiled.
The silence that followed Todd's involuntary profanity was the deepest silence Marcus had ever experienced. It was the silence of 100 people collectively recalibrating their understanding of reality. It was the silence of Vanessa Devereaux watching her carefully constructed narrative collapse into rubble. "Robert," Marcus said quietly, "I'd appreciate it if you could make sure the south exit is clear. My assistant and I will be leaving shortly." "Of course, Mr. Aldrich, right away." The general manager practically sprinted from the room. The door swung shut behind him, and the silence returned, deeper now, charged with electricity. And then Marcus did something that changed the entire tenor of the evening. He didn't leave. He didn't walk out in righteous victory while the crowd gaped at his retreating back. Instead, he turned to face the room and very deliberately removed his jacket. The second-hand blazer came off his shoulders, and beneath it was a simple white button-down, slightly rumpled, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked in that moment exactly like what he had always been, a man who worked with his mind and his hands and his heart, a man who never needed a costume to know his own worth. "I owe you all an apology," he said. The crowd stirred, confused. "I came here tonight under false pretenses, not lies. I didn't lie to anyone, but I allowed you to believe something that wasn't true. I allowed you to see the blazer and the quiet corner and the lack of fanfare, and I let you draw your own conclusions. That was a disservice to you and to myself and to the truth of who I am." He walked to the center of the ballroom, into the very space where Vanessa had stood moments earlier, holding court, dispensing cruelty like party favors. 20 years ago, I stood on a stage not unlike this one, and someone called me most likely to change the world. I've carried that with me, not as a burden, as a challenge, as a question I've asked myself every morning when I woke up and every night when I went to sleep. Are you doing it? Are you changing the world? Or are you just making money? He paused, looked around the room, made eye contact with people who had been strangers 20 years ago and were strangers still. For a long time, the answer was no. After the divorce, he didn't look at Vanessa, he didn't need to. After the divorce, I spent a few years in the wilderness. I lost my way. I lost my belief in myself. And then I met a man named Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, who was working on a solar storage technology that everyone said was impossible. He was operating out of a garage in Cleveland, burning through his life savings, and his landlord was about to evict him. Marcus's voice softened. I didn't invest in his company because I saw a profit opportunity. I invested because I recognized something in his eyes, the same desperation I'd felt when I was at my lowest, the same hunger to matter, the same refusal to give up, even when giving up was the sensible thing to do.
He spread his hands. Aegis Renewable Solutions was born in that garage. The technology Dr. Okonkwo developed is now powering hospitals in rural Kenya, schools in Bangladesh, and factories in Detroit.
The Orion acquisition we finalized today will eliminate more carbon emissions annually than the entire state of Vermont produces. And none of it would have happened if I had let someone else's definition of success become my own. The room was utterly still. If you take one thing away from tonight, let it be this. Marcus looked directly at the crowd, his gaze open and unguarded. I'm not special, I'm not a genius, I'm not a visionary. I'm just a man who stopped trying to prove himself to the people who had already decided he wasn't worth their time. The moment I stopped performing for an audience that wasn't watching, I became free to do the work that actually mattered. He turned to Vanessa. She was trembling. Her champagne glass had been set down, abandoned. Her perfectly constructed facade was crumbling, and beneath it was something raw and young and terrified, the girl she had been before life had taught her that cruelty was armor. "I'm not angry at you," Marcus said, and his voice was the gentlest it had been all evening. "I was for a long time. The divorce nearly broke me. The way it happened, the things that were said, the choices that were made, I carried that weight for years. But somewhere along the way, I realized that holding on to anger was like holding on to a hot coal and waiting for the other person to get burned. The only person suffering was me." Vanessa's eyes glistened. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I forgive you," Marcus said, "not because you deserve it, not because I'm some kind of saint, but because I deserve to be free. And I genuinely hope that you find the same freedom someday." He turned away from her, faced the room. "Now, earlier tonight, someone in this room made a comment about the bar tab being too steep for my budget." A ripple of nervous laughter. "The bar is open for the rest of the night. Everything's on me. Consider it my apology for the false pretenses." The laughter swelled, warmer now, tinged with relief. People were smiling. People were pulling out phones, not to capture humiliation, but to text friends, to share the story, to be part of something bigger than gossip. And then Marcus raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. "But before I go, there's something I need to say, something that goes beyond me and my story and this room." He took a breath. "This stopped being about me the moment my assistant walked through those doors. My name, my title, my money, those things got me attention in 90 seconds that I couldn't get in 20 years. But what about the people who don't have my name? What about the people who don't own the hotel? What about the people who are invisible, not by choice, but because the world has decided they don't matter?" He gestured at the ballroom, at the chandeliers, at the ivory linen and the crystal glassware. "This hotel employs over 200 people, housekeepers, cooks, dishwashers, bellmen, maintenance workers. Most of them work for wages that don't come close to the dignity of their labor. Most of them are invisible to the guests who walk through these doors. And until tonight, I was one of the people who didn't see them." His voice dropped. "I signed the deed to this building 18 months ago, and I never once asked about the working conditions of the people who make it run. I was too busy changing the world to notice the world that was right in front of me." He turned to Robert Chen, who had re-entered the ballroom and was standing near the back, his face unreadable. "Robert, effective Monday morning, I want a full audit of employment practices at this location, wages, benefits, scheduling, advancement opportunities. I want to know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and I want a plan on my desk by Friday for how we're going to be the best employer in this city, not just the most profitable." Robert nodded, his expression shifting from apprehension to something like hope. "Yes, sir, I'll have the team start immediately." "Thank you." Marcus turned back to the crowd. "I also want to make something available to everyone here tonight. On Monday, Aegis will be announcing a community investment fund, $20 million allocated to small businesses and nonprofits in this city. If you have a project that needs funding, a restaurant, a community center, a scholarship program, I want you to apply. My team will be reviewing every application personally." The murmuring rose again, but it was different now. It was the sound of possibility taking root. "And one more thing." Marcus's voice hardened just slightly, with an edge of quiet steel. "For the past hour, I've been standing in a corner of this room, watching people treat a man in a second-hand blazer like he was less than human. I'm not the only one in this world who gets underestimated. I'm not the only one who gets judged by what they wear, or where they sit, or how much money they appear to have." He looked around the room. "The next time you see someone in a corner, alone, dressed in clothes that don't fit your idea of success, think about tonight. Think about what you almost did. Think about what you almost missed, because the person you dismiss might be the person who changes your world. And more importantly, they're a person, full stop. And that should be enough."
The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of absorption, of learning, of slow, dawning understanding. And then a woman stood up. She was in the back of the room, near the service entrance, red hair, kind eyes, the woman Elias had described. "Mr. Aldrich," she said, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Diane. My daughter is in your son's robotics club. He's a wonderful young man, kind, brilliant, generous. And I think," she paused, her eyes glistening, "I think I understand now why he never talks about his family's money." Marcus's expression softened. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." "My daughter adores him," Diane continued, "and after tonight I understand why. He has his father's character, his father's quiet strength." She smiled. "I'd be honored to have you and Elias over for dinner sometime." For the first time all evening, Marcus Aldrich looked genuinely, unguardedly moved. His eyes grew bright, and he blinked several times before speaking. "I'd like that very much," he said. And as the room erupted into spontaneous applause, not the polite applause of a reunion speech, but the genuine, heartfelt applause of people who had witnessed something rare and true, Marcus Aldrich walked to the back of the room, shook Diane's hand, and exchanged phone numbers. Behind him, Vanessa stood motionless, her face a battlefield of emotions. Her husband had retreated to the bar, his whiskey refilled, his expression that of a man who had just realized his wife had cost him the most important professional contact of his career. But no one was watching Vanessa anymore. The spotlight had shifted, the story had changed, and the quiet man in the corner had become, in the space of a single evening, the standard against which everyone in that room would measure themselves for the rest of their lives. 3 weeks later, the transformation was complete. The Hilton Grand Lakeside had become the flagship property in a new initiative that Aegis Hospitality called the Dignity Standard. Wages for entry-level employees had been raised to a living wage with full benefits. Scheduling practices had been overhauled to provide stable, predictable hours. A career advancement program had been established, offering free training and education to any employee who wanted to move up. And at the entrance of every staff area, a small brass plaque had been installed bearing the words, "Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be seen." The changes had made local news, then national news. Other hotel chains, pressured by public opinion and employee organizing, had begun to announce similar reforms. The phrase, "the Aldrich effect," had entered the business lexicon. And Marcus Aldrich, who had spent a decade hiding from the spotlight, had become its unlikely champion. But the change that mattered most to Marcus happened in a quiet corner of a high school robotics lab. Elias Aldrich stood at a workbench calibrating a sensor array when his phone buzzed. It was a text from his father.
Dinner at Diane's tonight. Her daughter asked if you'd help her with the programming for the regional competition. I said yes. Hope that's okay. Dad. Elias smiled. He typed a response. More than okay. Thanks, Dad, for everything. And then he set down his phone, picked up his screwdriver, and got back to work. He didn't need to say more. His father understood. His father had always understood. That was the thing about the Aldrich men. They didn't need to shout to be heard.
6 months after the reunion, on a cool October evening, a man in a worn leather jacket walked through the lobby of the Hilton Grand Lakeside. He didn't announce himself. He didn't approach the front desk. He simply found a quiet chair in the corner of the lobby bar, ordered a cup of coffee, and watched. He watched the bellman greet a family with genuine warmth. He watched a housekeeper pause to help an elderly guest navigate the hallway. He watched the front desk clerk handle a difficult customer with patience and grace. He watched the invisible machinery of dignity humming quietly, transforming a building into something more than a business. And when a young server approached his table and asked if he needed anything else, the man in the leather jacket looked up and smiled. "No," Marcus Aldrich said, "I have everything I need." The server nodded and walked away, not recognizing the man who had changed her life. And that was exactly how Marcus wanted it, because a person should never be measured by their clothes or their appearance, by the car they drive or the corner they stand in. A person should be measured by their character and their choices and the quiet courage they bring to a world that too often mistakes noise for strength. Respect is something every person deserves, not as a reward for success, but as a birthright of human dignity. And the greatest power any of us can wield is not the power to crush our enemies, but the power to lift up the people around us. There was one more thing. It had taken only one person willing to stand up in the face of an injustice, one person who had absorbed humiliation and responded not with revenge, but with reform, to begin turning the whole thing around. Marcus Aldrich had not set out to change the hotel industry or become a media sensation or make his ex-wife regret the choices she had made. He had simply refused to be silent when silence would have been easier. And that refusal, that single act of courage offered without noise, had been enough to start something that would outlast him. The server returned to the bar. "Who was that guy in the corner?" she asked her colleague. Her colleague shrugged. "No idea. Seemed nice, though." "Yeah," the server said. "He did." And somewhere in the quiet of the lobby, the brass plaque on the staff entrance caught the light and shone. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be seen. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that quiet strength can change the world, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.